Welcome to Kids Gone Global, a community podcast brought to you by the International School of Hamburg, Germany's pioneer institution in international education. I'm Sarah Reich, your host and the school's Director of Community Relations. In this series, we explore how this international school helps its students hone their skills to become global citizens who can thrive and engage fully in our interconnected and ever-changing world. So what are these 21st century life skills? Together, we will explore the dynamic landscape of education and cover how schools are adapting to prepare students for a global society. I have the privilege of engaging in conversations with students and experts in the field of international education and childcare. Through these dialogues, we aim to expand our understanding of educational practices in a globalized world. Welcome and enjoy the show. Today, we turn to creativity and the arts. Being creative has always been a big part of what divides us human beings from machines. As AI is now pervasive to our lives and work, it seems to narrow the divide between us and machines. Our creativity, as in our ability to use our imagination and original ideas to create something unique, becomes ever more valued. Here to discuss the importance of fostering creativity through the arts in education today is Adrian More. Adrian is an award-winning pianist and composer, singer and stage director. Brought up in South Africa and educated in England, he is the head of arts at the International School of Hamburg. Welcome, Adrian.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here, and thanks for the privilege of being able to talk today.
Can you introduce yourself and your background in the field of art education?
Sure. So as you said, I'm from South Africa. I grew up in a little town called Virginia in the middle of nowhere, and then ended up in Cape Town, where I studied music and music education and maths, actually. And then I went on to go to the Royal College of Music in London, where I did a master's in composition, piano, voice, and also went on to do a PGCE in education. But within all that, what is important is that already in my third year of undergraduate studies, I started lecturing to first-year students and learned the power of being able to share knowledge and being able to encourage minds to go out there and learn. And of course, that sparked the passion in me for education and becoming an educator.
Just on that point, what specifically inspired you to focus on the integration of arts in the school curriculum?
Well, I don't believe that any subject is an individual subject or discipline. I don't think the world works that way. I don't think we go through the world just being only a maths or a number. We are a combination of a whole bunch of facets, and specifically in the arts, where the exploration of self is paramount, I find that it's important for us to then comprehend the power and the development we can have through being on stage, through being in front of people, through learning to speak, but also through discipline and through spending time alone working through artistic content. It's really important for me to have the opportunity to express different ways of the self and collaboration and the meta self. And through only one art, I don't know if that is really it's doable, but it's better to obviously explore it through all the different possible means, movement and voice and sound and drawing and the creative mind, that exploration.
So you're saying that art basically transcends all other disciplines and subjects in schools?
I wouldn't say that art transcends other subjects, but I would say that it dances with them, and it's an integral part of how we coexist. To ignore the arts or to pretend as though it's not a vital part, a vital organ in our structure is basically like saying cut out the heart of someone or cut out their brain. You need all the other parts, but we work together. With regards to your question as to the skills we learn through the arts, they're numerous and we have tons of data to support that. But the core parts of what we learn in the arts, for me, are the soft skills about life, learning to talk to each other, learning to be able to understand each other, be able to look at actions and physicality and understand what messages we're receiving and giving. There's communication, but also there's a strong creative component, learning about how human creation and generating ideas with all its randomness is connected to us. We are interlinked with that. There is a severe and deep dive into critical analysis of the self, of a text, of each other. So there's critical thought consistently, there's constant feedback to each other, with each other, and of the self. So we have tons and tons of skills that we constantly have to learn. I think building blocks for perhaps building a better society are nurtured through the arts. It allows us to form good structures mentally and be able to understand what sort of filters we need to put in place or process to be able to function as a model citizen, as a person who contributes to society.
How does it differ from other subjects in schools in terms of the skills it imparts to students?
While most subjects have their discipline and their ideas behind them, as I told you, I did maths as well, and I love maths and I understand its place. A large part of what I learned there has to do with certain mental structures and lateral thinking. But I find that the exploration of those ideas is far deeper within the arts and allows me as a human being, not just as an artist, to have mental practices in place that allow me to function well in society. As you say, being empathetic, learning about that empathy, understanding what other people are feeling and experiencing when we do that in theatre. And we spend a large amount of time looking at each other and looking at ourselves and understanding that empathetic response to each other. We also have to learn emotional regulation and understand how to interpret critique, interpret feedback in such a way that we don't take it personally, but learn how to develop our EQ, really, so that we understand what emotions we're feeling, but how to regulate them. And so the arts are a perfect platform for all walks of life, no matter where you come from, no matter what language you speak, no matter what you believe, to be able to have your boundaries pushed a little bit and to learn how to deal with that. Yeah, I think the emotional sphere that we're constantly having to face up to is constantly explored.
So basically, it's learning about practicing discomfort in a way, isn't it?
Exactly. That's a really good point. I think people tend to shy away from discomfort. Complacency is, I think, anathema to progress. I think it's the antithesis of it. I think it's going against everything that we want to do. In order for humans, people, children, adults to progress in some sort of way, you need some sort of discomfort. And that is quite often some form of conflict. You have two core types of conflict, which we go into quite in depth in theatre and in music: external versus internal conflict. And that's when you have people against people or people against machines. Your car breaks down, that's a type of conflict. Or internally, does that person like me? Or have I made the right choice? Or am I going the right way? Or should I stand over here? Those simple points of conflict are tackled quite effectively and exclusively in theatre in particular, but also within the realm of music with regards to dissonance and consonance and how sound vibrates and how it goes against itself and then it works with itself naturally, planets vibrating and all that. So this concept of conflict cannot be hidden. You cannot hide from conflict in the arts. It's consistently there, and you're constantly having to have conflict with yourself, because I see it in the students every day. There's this fear of what I'm creating is not going to be good enough, or I'm too afraid to even begin because it's going to sound terrible, or I'm too afraid to begin because I'm not going to remember my lines, or I'm not even going to go do this because I'm not going to stand in my place and I'm going to look stupid. And eventually, everyone gets up and does what they have to do because that's the performing arts. It pressurizes you, creates this uncomfortable setting, and everyone builds internal strength. I see it all the time, even with myself. What I learn through each performance and what I learn through each moment where I'm able to stand in front of people, or even one like this where I'm able to speak to other people, you learn something about yourself. And the arts are the perfect platform for that, for developing the unique voice within you, for having the conflict and the courage to face up to that conflict and a safe space in which to do so.
Now, turning to the actual creative process in itself, how do you help students find their own voice through the arts?
So how we develop creativity through the arts, what's important is to connect it to what I was saying before about developing that individual voice through critical thought, through conflict, through the challenges we face, but also through the joy of performance. What happens is students and adults as well who go through this process learn so much more about themselves, about the world around them and the people around them. And in that process, something magical happens. Self-belief is born, not born, but I suppose it's more developed. And people become more resilient because they've learned to understand that not everyone is against them. They've learned to understand that quite often what comes around towards us or at us is usually stuff that can help make us stronger. And by being in environments when you have to do an artwork, which is self-expression, and you're creating this work and you're putting a lot of your soul and personality into it, everyone gets to see it, and it's there, it's permanent, it's tangible. And that tangibility, that creative process, nurtured through the self-belief and the resilience. So what happens is we build this individual self through what we're doing in the arts, and it's tons of fun as well, and super scary. And as we do that, then we start creating these things, and then we're exposed to all this critique, and suddenly we build this sort of thing around us to understand that no one is stabbing us. We're not we're not being attacked or something. People are just giving their thoughts and their ideas. And so we realize that my voice, who I am, and what I believe in can resonate with some people. There are people who are going to say good things back to me. But more importantly, those things which I feel are more challenging to hear are not necessarily bad things. We are automatically becoming more resilient and understanding that we can survive this world and we can get through it by being who we are and thinking about what we want to create. I really feel that this creative process that we allow ourselves in the arts is a journey to understanding each other, not just ourselves. It's really like an interconnectedness by being able to explore ideas with each other and go, I'm creating something and I'm being brave about it. You're creating, and we look at it together and we go, wow, we're creating stuff together. We're making magic. I think that is probably one of the most important parts of being a human being, that magic of existence.
The magic of existence through the shared creative process. What a beautiful way to frame it. So now, what about the delivery? What is the role of art in enhancing your art students' ability to focus and pay attention on the details, on getting the project done right through from its creative instance to its delivery in a concert or a stage?
Yeah, I like that thought, and I like this idea because it's something that people overlook and don't speak about very often. And as a musician primarily, one of the things, again, this is also resilience, but one of the things I've learned to do is I've had to spend many hours alone in a small room on an instrument, practicing this instrument by myself and having the wherewithal to stay focused with no distractions on, let's say, 10 pages of music. To give you an example, when I did my master's recital, I had to learn 80 minutes of music of a very high caliber. And for 6 months, I was practicing from 7 in the morning till about 10 in the evening every day, including Saturdays and Sundays. And I perhaps took 2 hours break in between for meals and water, but the rest of it was practicing. And that process to get to that point, obviously that's when you're further advanced, you learn about the value of repeating things, of the labor. It's like a labor of love towards your art. You do something over and over, and you learn a discipline, you learn a patience, a very deep patience to understand that what you're doing is the journey, and that what you're doing is an art in and of itself of discipline, which is hard because you want to just get to the end result really quickly because that's the reward, right? You have this really cool piece, this delivery, this thing at the end of it. And I think that same process applies to any technique you learn in terms of being on stage. You have to spend hours and hours in front of a mirror practicing your lines, practicing your movements, and making sure that you know exactly what you're supposed to do and or how you're going to deliver your lines. So again, a type of discipline which you probably or don't necessarily get in other subjects. And I would say that level of patience and discipline that one needs to apply to practices in art to refine your vision is probably the most important part of the whole experience for me. And I think for my students too, when I read their reflections, when they discover that they can do this and that they can actually stay focused for sometimes, it often happens in music classes where we have an 80-minute session at the end of it, they go, it's over, I've hardly done anything. And they realize that they stayed focused for a full 80 minutes. It surprises them. And I think because we're exploring something personal and because we're trying to develop our way of expressing to have a final result, whatever that would be, as you called it, a delivery, we know we're only going to get one shot at that delivery usually. And so, in order to prepare for that, we force ourselves to learn to focus, to stay disciplined, and also to be patient and, in a way, a little bit kind to ourselves, like to reward ourselves and go, hey, I managed to get that right. Now let's tackle the next bit. And I don't know whether you get this in other subjects of the cuff. I am not sure that I can think of a subject where you have to have that level of discipline where you have one performance moment. So yeah, it's really cool.
I just wanted to reflect on the fact that you're the head of arts in an international school. So you're basically in a global society here. We've seen in the press recently a number of clashes happening around art. So exhibitions where some pieces were offensive to some parts of the population, and more this maybe politicization of the arts, certainly here in Europe. And my question is, how does art education contribute to maybe global cultural awareness or cultural awareness and appreciation of diversity?
That's a big question. I'm no specialist on the political landscape of arts, but we do address this consistently in our classes because art has quite often sparked a lot of controversy for a lot of people around the world. Because, in essence, one might believe that art is and of itself contentious because it's meant to provoke, it's meant to make you think, it's meant to, it's meant to be this expression of an internal discovery, and that doesn't necessarily sit well with most people. And when an art form or a particular artwork pushes buttons for a particular people or particular language or particular belief, the argument could always be that should not be the case because it might seem offensive. But we also learn about inclusivity and being inclusive. And inclusion is a really important component of an international school to understand that, well, everyone is different and comes from different backgrounds. And art has done the same in the past. We've had various examples where artworks have made people uncomfortable. But I think to destroy that artwork or to take it down or to say that it's not okay to have that artwork, I don't think that is necessarily a good thing for humanity, because we need to have that thought process, right? And we need to understand that people have different perspectives. And I think excluding a perspective or excluding a deep work from someone that has a passion behind it takes that idea out of the picture. And if it's out of the picture, that thing can really become dangerous then, because we don't see it. And art is not afraid to expose the things that make people uncomfortable. And we definitely address that, especially in visual arts. We talk about politicized artworks and we talk about people who've made waves saying things that other people are uncomfortable hearing.
Moving on to real-world applications, of which you've already mentioned a few, do you have examples to share with us of students who have significantly benefited from art education in their personal or later in their professional lives?
I have so many. I've got tons. I've got personal ones and I've got tons of students that I could talk about just without even thinking about it. I'll start with me first and then I'll talk about some of my students. So for me, the experience of participating in the arts has been life-changing. My personal journey is not an easy one. I think everyone's got their challenges. It was through music and performance that I was able to find my feet, because it was the one place where I could safely explore emotions and where I could develop myself and where I could have a platform to express what I had gone through and what I was going through. I struggled at times to say things, and I struggled even to leave my room at times. But knowing that I could have a platform to go through these emotions and to explore that built strength within me to face up to the world, really. And since then, I feel I've taken big steps and big leaps. I'm still learning every day, especially through art, to develop and to grow and to be better as a citizen and as a human being. In terms of success stories with students, I may as well mention one of our students here at the school. That's the first that pops into my head, who arrived at our school when she was in grade 10 and came from the German system, and to my mind was broken. And that's not a nice word, but what I mean by that is she expressed that word. That was her word. She said, I'm broken. And she was afraid to say a word in class. When I gave a notation idea, she didn't want to write anything down. When we looked at some music, she would go into anxiety about touching the keyboard. And what I had learned is that in her past, she'd had some trauma with not just with music, but with various other subjects and persecution and bullying and so on and so forth. Anyway, slowly but surely, she started realizing she has a compositional voice and realized that music was an opportunity for her to start developing some form of confidence in what she could do. She recently graduated and got distinctions all around in composition, in music, and is able to work on digital audio workstations. She makes a whole bunch of cool music like R&B type stuff and jazz music, and is really finding her voice, and just consistently and frequently says that without music, she would be lost. And I think it's really important to stop there for a moment and just think about what happened there. A person who, at the age of 15 or 16, felt like there was no path forward. And if they didn't have those arts, who knows where they would have gone. It's incredible the development and how she has grown as a person. Even her parents don't recognize her. They just are so happy with how she's grown, and everyone attributes it to her music and to the fact that this was the place to give her that freedom. Another example, and I think the last one I'll mention so I don't go on too much about it, is this: when I was at the University of Cape Town and when I lectured there, we often went into underprivileged areas and we tried to give opportunities to those who didn't have opportunity. And so we had a foundational course at the University of Cape Town, which I helped engineer and build. And we had a student who came in from the Eastern Cape. Her name is Pretinon Yende. And yeah, when she arrived, initially she was shy. And through this process, she developed a strong voice. And if you speak to her now, she sings all over the world in all opera houses around the world. She's world famous within opera circles. And she will tell you 100% that her confidence and her character and her resilience and her ability to find out who she is came through music. Yeah. So it's incredible what the arts can do for people. It's got a lot of applications in terms of real world applications. Yeah.
Turning to the practical implementation of arts in the school organization, what are the common challenges that you see that schools face when integrating arts into the curriculum?
The arts are largely misunderstood. I've heard the expression from colleagues, oh, people just go there and they just have fun. They go to music, they just have fun. They go to theater, oh, they should just have fun. And yes, we do have fun, but it's a lot more than that, because the reflective process, the caring process, the way we learn to become more knowledgeable, the risks we have to take, the way we have to inquire and challenge thoughts and ideas, our communication, the way we have to balance ourselves, and we have to constantly stay open-minded. All that stuff happens in the arts, right? But the way that is communicated and transferred in the classroom is not necessarily through a rigorous testing process. It's not an A plus B equals C or A squared plus B squared equals C squared scenario. It's more a case of the learning process is individual. Each person is individual. We have differentiation for everyone. And so integrating the arts program into the education platform can sometimes be very challenging because it's not so black and white. It's not so Boolean. And I find that I spend a lot of energy having to explain that the biggest process in arts education is not what's written on paper, but what is experienced with the students. And we are in a world of technology, we are in a world of AI, and we are in a world where everything needs to be documented and where everyone needs to have checks in place. But that's not always so easy in the arts. With the arts, people often don't understand how to quantify what we learn because it's not so tangible. It's not just an A and a B. And so there's almost that existential question of why do we even need this in school? Because what value does it really have? Because it's not so measurable. But the opposite is actually true, because the arts teach us the things that, as I said, are the building blocks of humanity. And as we know, if you look at it in yourself, it's very hard to describe yourself and who you are and to know who you are. That's the arts, right? So what makes it any different in education? We're obviously going to have difficulty understanding what everyone is learning and how they're learning it. But we know learning is happening, and we know that what we learn here has a huge impact on every other subject and how everyone goes through their daily lives.
Is there any studies that demonstrate this point, that the presence of a strong art program in school is better in general for students' overall performance?
I recently did a talk on building confidence in the arts. And so I did a deep dive into a whole bunch of data and analytics on arts programs. And one of the articles I used, they had done an overarching study of 2,000 separate studies on education and the arts. And what they did is they paired art schools. There are three types of schools they classified. One is schools that have no arts program, or schools that have a clear and defined arts program that in which they're investing, and one where arts are taught within the classroom, like within maths, some arts ideas are explored. They then looked at the data in terms of academic outputs in other subjects like maths and science and what effect this has on that, but also in terms of successful candidates post-school, in terms of how their careers go after that and their opportunities and their salaries and their earning chances and so on and so forth. The end result of this analysis shows that schools which have a strong arts program are about 20 to 25% stronger overall academically, overall in terms of students' involvement, in terms of empathy, in terms of connection to teachers, to adults, to the community. They looked at all of that in terms of their ability to succeed further on in life. And 20 to 25% higher academically, but also these candidates tended to earn almost 50% more post school, candidates from those schools who had arts programs, than those who had no program at all. Those who had a soft program where arts are taught in classrooms not as an arts subject were somewhere in the middle. So there is very clear data showing us that a strong arts program aligns with strong academic excellence and also gives us an opportunity to succeed in adult life. The data is there. I found one study that connected people who were artists professionally, who had become artists professionally, in other words, painters, musicians, dancers, etc., even writers, who had then transferred to a different career, like becoming CEOs, in particular executive positions in companies. And the success rate of those people, and it's something like 97% or whatever, of those people who transferred were able to turn companies around or were seen as perceived as successful executives, CEOs or whatever, CMOs. And the arts were held responsible for that by those people. So it's really interesting to see that study.
Great. We can share that study in our podcast notes on the website. I would like to turn to AI because this is a big topic, the elephant in the room for the entire education sector. How do you see AI impacting the creative landscape and the teaching of arts in a school like ISH?
So the question of what place this has in education and how we cope with it moving forward needs to be tackled head on. I don't think that, to me, it's not an elephant in the room because I talk about it a lot with my kids and I show them what it can do. And I also try to teach the students how to utilize it to the best of their abilities. In the end, a human being always has their creativity, their individuality, and how they express that and how they want to do that. And the arts will always facilitate that, and instruments will always facilitate that. There's not really a big worry in my mind about whether we will no longer have a place for human art or human music or human theater. I think it's very much probably going to thrive even more because we'll learn how to let AI help us make it even better. And I also feel that a lot of people in opposition to AI would then want to develop and invest in human ideas. My answer to your question is by embracing the AI, by looking at what it can do, by learning to use it, by being a part of the process, we can facilitate a stronger future in the arts overall. And I think this is probably true of all subjects. I think in the end, how we shift and how we change as humans is going to obviously depend on us, but we are adaptable. We've been through quite a lot of changes in the last few hundred years, and the rate of change is increasing consistently, sure, but we adapt. And I have hope, and I strongly believe that with the right people in place in education who understand this, we can definitely make something magical, and I don't think it's something to fear.
So basically, you're saying that AI will sharpen our search for our individuality.
It can. If we go down the path correctly, absolutely. AI is a challenge. And we have to face it head on. We have to say, hey, let's look at what this can do. Let's look at where it's going. And yeah, maybe it's going faster than I thought. And maybe some people may feel it's going to take my job. But actually, I feel those who learn to master AI are going to be able to do those jobs even better. So, as you say, sharpening our creative pencils, sharpening our artistic minds, sharpening everything we can do around us, because a lot of the stuff that in the past needed to grapple with, we don't need to anymore because AI can do it for us, right? And so now we can use that and we can develop it in a different way and see where that takes us. It's like a whole new development. It's really interesting, fun, and exciting.
What advice would you give to educators?
I would advise educators in the arts and in other subjects to be looking into what developments are happening in their discipline, in their field quite often, and to learn the tools, to go dig into it, to see, hey, what's happening? How can I play with this tool? How can I learn from it? And how can I then teach from it? What is happening here that might actually improve my teaching environment? And I have used some of these tools in my class in digital audio workstations where AI creates some chord progressions for the kids based on what we've learned. And then it solves the problem of the students having to spend hours and hours and hours making up those chords because something's come up with 10 possibilities for them and they can then start the selection process. So look into what's happening in your discipline, learn the tools, learn how to transfer that into some form of educational environment and grow and develop it and don't shy away from it.
So that's for the educators. You began the interview by stressing how important the arts are in the process of self-discovery, building self-esteem, driving a project to the end, building up a discipline and a resilience within ourselves and building up projects with others. My last question refers to parents. How can parents help in this process?
I think parents have to, without a doubt, push children and students to at least go and try something in the arts as a starting point, because a lot of parents don't do that. But the parents who do let their kids do some arts, I would say take it a step further. Be involved in the process, see what's being created, but also take your children to museums, take your children to art galleries, take them to music shows, take them to theater shows. Really invest in taking kids away from phones and from technology for moments of just looking at humanity and looking at what we create. So outside of school, I'd strongly recommend that. And I know a lot of parents do that, and I see it in the students in the classroom. But also in terms of the school environment, get involved in the arts programs, contact the arts teachers and find out if there's something you can do. We have musicals. Most schools have some sort of play or musical or some sort of production. Get involved, find out what that process is, see what happens and see what happens to young minds when they get involved in those processes. It's a really simple thing. It's about being involved. And parents really need to put time aside, not just to focus on that maths problem or to take your son or daughter to a football game or whatever. For every football game, take them to a theater show or something. Balance it out. Let's have the full human experience. That's what I'd strongly recommend for parents.
Thank you, Adrian. We've learned a lot about the transformative power of arts in education. Any last thoughts?
As a last thought, I would say that the arts will always be there because we're human, right? We're always going to create. We're always going to want to do interesting things to express ourselves. I would strongly recommend and encourage each person listening to this to go and do your own artistic journey. Go figure out, go play an instrument, find something where you can explore that journey, that challenging journey. And in that way, you can see what other people go through and become a more empathetic human being and have more rational and balanced conversations and collaborations with those around you. The arts are the way forward for that.
Thank you, Adrian, for taking us on a journey through the arts in education.
It was a pleasure, and thanks so much for the opportunity, and thanks for the wonderful and beautiful discussion today.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Kids Gone Global, brought to you by the International School of Hamburg. There's a reading list available for this episode and others of this series on our website. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.